Treasurer Doug Ducey here today, who I completely trust and I know has the full capability to conduct a study to give recommendations and tell the legislature and the governor how to transition our antiquated, expensive, defined benefit public pension system into a modern defined contribution 401k style system. Our ultimate goal, the ultimate goal of reformers of public pensions should be this, and that is to eliminate the concept of giving government workers a defined benefit. You cannot today receive that defined benefit. Let me give you the example of what that would be like. If I said to you, you have $100,000, I'm going to guarantee you an 8% rate of return. An 8% rate of return, your principal is guaranteed. You will never lose it. If I were selling you an annuity with those terms, how many of you would buy it? I would be a millionaire annuity salesman. Now, what if I told you that that $100,000, you only had to pay $50,000 of that, the rest of it your employer would pay? How many would buy that? Okay. That is the nature of a defined benefit program. There is a reason, friends, why defined benefit programs do not exist in the private sector anymore. It is because they have driven some of the nation's largest companies into bankruptcy. Is there any reason to believe that somehow the math will be different for government than it was for the private sector? There is no reason to believe that. There are many things about my pension reform bill that infuriated union bosses and, frankly, many of my colleagues and politicians in the legislature. But perhaps the one thing that made them the angriest is when I voluntarily took myself out of the public pension system. By removing myself from the public pension system, I voluntarily gave up over $250,000 in pension benefits that would have been paid out to me over the course of my lifetime. Now, here's the kicker. I could begin collecting those pension payments as an elected official after only 5 years of service. Imagine if you could begin collecting your retirement after 5 years of service. Well, the ugly fact is that of the 4 pension systems in Arizona, the public safety system, the Maine State Employee Safety System, which also has our teachers in it, our corrections system, and our elected official system, the ugly fact is that the richest, the most beneficial one of all is the one for the elected officials. Is it any surprise that a system designed by politicians for politicians is the richest one of all? I felt very strongly as we began this process of putting together this bill and moving it through the legislature that we should employ a what's good for the goose is good for the gander approach. My belief was that if I could demonstrate that I was willing to make dramatic changes to the pension system of my colleagues, my fellow elected officials, and if I was willing to drop my own pension entirely, get rid of it, I felt that maybe the union leadership would see our good faith efforts and join us in saving their system from its own financial ruin. I thought that they would see the math, they would understand our motives, and then they would embrace real reform. And it's at this part where I refer to it as the education of Kirk Adams, because the reality was far different than what I was seeking. In fact, the government unions hired a professional public relations firm to run the opposition campaign. They ran statewide television commercials, and behind the scenes, they employed standard union intimidation tactics. In front of the scenes, in front of the curtain, in front of committees, they engaged in the emotional pandering, claiming that those who supported Senate Bill 1609 and the House equivalent were opposed to firemen and policemen and our heroes. They also made very clear their intentions to exact revenge on those who supported the bill. As the chief sponsor and pusher of that bill, you can imagine what that meant. Even going so far on one occasion to pull aside a member of my staff and say to them that wherever Speaker Adams goes, we will do everything we can to ensure that he never holds public office again. This is the type of fear that the union leadership will try to instill in your elected officials, whether it's at the state level, the federal level, or especially the local level, where they seem to have an outsized influence. Now, those of you who have followed state politics will know that when I assumed the speakership in 2009, it coincided with a very difficult period of time in our state history. In the last 3 years, we've had 10 major budget votes. We've had passed major economic reforms, and we've made many other very big and difficult choices and decisions. But there has never been a bill in that entire period of time that was more difficult to get the votes on and to pass than the pension reform bill. As a matter of fact, the day before I had scheduled that bill for a vote, I had a member of the Republican caucus come into my office and sit down with me and say, "Mr. Speaker, we don't want you to be embarrassed. There are 13 Republicans that will vote no on this bill. You're going to lose it on the floor. You're best not to bring this bill to a vote." Well, I don't like to lose my votes. And so we continued to work the bill, and when we brought that bill to the floor the next day, we had 5 votes more than we needed to pass that pension reform bill. In the end, the bill passed. It went back to the Senate. It passed in the Senate, and it was signed by the governor into law. The system here in Arizona is now on a more sustainable path. Broader reforms through the study under the Treasurer's Department are in the wings, and taxpayers can rest easier but cannot rest completely. The lesson in my mind is this: if the future we desire for this country is one of fiscal soundness and economic vibrancy, then we must elect and support individuals who will no longer kick the can down the road, who will stop ignoring the problems that we face. We have to have honest conversations with the people of this country. We have to talk about, in plain terms, just what it is that we can afford and what we can no longer afford. And collectively, we have to have the courage to take on the entrenched government unions, come what may. To me, that is the recipe for a future America that I want to live in and I want my children to inherit. Thank you very much.